Hi, friends. Welcome and good evening. Today's discussion is on OECD's corporate tax statistics. So, anything to do with tax at the macro level, the discussion is always interesting because you get a very different perspective on what's happening around. And this is something which OECD felt they were lacking in terms of data collection across countries. And so last year they came up with the first corporate tax statistics publication. And this is the second edition. And invariably they try and compare what are the various components of tax, the various ratios pertaining to it across geographies. And it actually gives a fascinating perspective of how the um, various economies are evolving. And you can very clearly see, based on the stage of the development, the proportions are homogeneously spread. Now, I would thank Sundar, Gracelyn, and Jugal for their efforts for this presentation. It's a fairly heavy one. These are some of the terms we shall look at it as and when we move on. So this is the agenda for the day, friends. We have a broad overview, corporate tax revenues. Uh, we look at geography wise, statutory corporate income tax rates, corporate effective tax rates, tax incentives for R&D, anonymized and aggregated statistics collected via CBCR. CBCR is country by country reporting. It's a very interesting data what we have around it. Intellectual property regimes, CFC rules, and of course interest limitations. So as we discussed, the corporate tax statistics database, it helps. So in 2015, the BEPS Action 11 report on measuring and monitoring BEPS highlighted the lack of quality data on corporate taxation, and they said that's a major limitation in propounding policies in this regard. And therefore, as a first edition was published in Jan 2019, the second edition, thanks to COVID, there was a delay, came out in July 2020. And the second edition, apart from the corporate tax revenue, statutory corporate tax rates, effective rates, and incentives, is also focused on anonymized and aggregated statistics collected through CBCR, CFC rules, and interest limitation rules. So, interest limitation can also be, you can look at it as an offshoot of thin capitalization rule, which is prevalent in many countries. India has also introduced thin capitalization in a different form. Okay, corporate tax revenues. So the share of corporate tax revenue in 2017 as a percentage of total tax revenue was about 14.5%, and which increased from 12% odd in 2000 across 93 jurisdictions. And it was significantly, when it comes to as a percentage of GDP, it was 3.1% on an average, which is significantly higher compared to what it was about in 2000, just 50% more. It was 2% of GDP in 2000. It's increased. The corporate tax to GDP ratio has gone up to 3% now. And the size of the corporate tax revenues vis-a-vis total tax revenues, of course, one is a function of the GDP. Second, of course, is the categorization of the jurisdiction. So, and corporate tax revenues are again driven by economic cycles, as we are aware. And it reached a peak of 3.6 and uh, moved down to 3.2 post your economic crisis, and then further down to 3.1. And of course, now we are at about the same number at this point. Also, in jurisdictions where the exploitation of natural resources is a significant part of the economy, the changes in the share of corporate tax in total tax from 2015 to 17 were primarily driven by commodity prices. Classic case, you can look at Russia, you can look at Venezuela, you can look at the entire Middle East and parts of Africa where this would hold good. Now, again, corporate tax made up more than 25% of total tax revenues in countries like Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Nigeria, Singapore, Trinidad and Tobago. And in contrast, in countries like Bahamas, Estonia, Italy, Slovenia, uh, Tokelau, the revenues were less than 5% of the total tax revenue. And if you were to look at India in this region, India, the corporate tax is about anywhere between 29 to 30%. So we are around 30% range. So if we were to look at the global average, it's about 15%, 14.6%. Uh, in 2017 for India, it is for the same year it's about 30%. So we are twice the global average. So this is where we need to figure out. You would see the as more advanced and I'm sorry, a nation gets, the share of total taxes to its and corporate taxes to total taxes keeps coming down. I think US it's about 17%, Australia it's about 15%, Canada it's 10%. So you would see that the way things move. Now, what is this variation? So there's a multitude of reasons why this variations could occur. One, because of the degree to which the firms and the jurisdictions are incorporated. So the extent of entities being created. So in India, if you notice, to give you an example, a corporate structure is a last a person would prefer because of the compliances involved. The breadth of the corporate income tax base, the current stage of the economic cycle, because if the country is just passed out of an investment cycle, so then there would be a huge amount of depreciation and carry forward losses which could be set up, so that would have an impact going forward for some time. Extent of reliance on other types of taxes such as personal income tax and consumption, that could also drive. Extent of reliance on tax revenues from exploitation of natural resources and other instruments to postpone the taxation of earned profits, like any deferrals or other things. So these would significantly have an impact on the proportion of corporate tax to total tax as well as GDP. Now let's look at as a share of GDP. If you notice, the ratio of corporate tax was between 2 to 5% in 2017. And for certain jurisdictions like Australia, Cuba, Malaysia, Luxembourg, Seychelles, it was more than 5%. But in the OECD and the Africas, when we say Africa, we talk about 26 jurisdictions. The average was almost identical at 3 to 2.8% of the GDP, respectively. And in Latin America, it was marginally higher at 3.4%. And the factors for variation of corporate tax again could include, there are multitude of reasons which we shall. The rationale is fairly similar compared to what we saw for corporate tax to total tax. Now, if we are to look at comparables, friends, in India, the corporate tax to total GDP is about 3.5%. US is about 1.1%. I mean, it's clearly a capitalist jurisdiction where corporates love to earn money there, and thanks to various other reliefs what they have. But India is on the mean, you would say, because the total global average is 3.1, and we are at 3.5. So there's nothing much to worry as such for us. Let's look at the statutory corporate tax rates. If you see the trend, which is the headline rate, the average combined, again, when we say combined, because in certain jurisdictions like US itself, there's a federal tax, there's a state tax. For all covered jurisdictions was 20.6% in 2020, which is significantly come down from 2000. It was 28% in 2000. It's come down to 20.6. You can see the case of India itself. From 30 today, we have as low as 15% possible. Again, of the 109 jurisdictions covered, 21 had corporate tax rates equal to or above 30%, with India having one of the highest corporate tax rates, because at that time we also included dividend distribution taxes. But again, currently we do not have dividend distribution tax, but still we would be, if I were to take at, see that 25% or 22% or 15% with surcharge and cess puts us in the higher space. Again, comparing 2000 and 2020, the corporate tax rates fell in 88 jurisdictions, and these were same in 15 jurisdictions and increased in 6 jurisdictions. Again, changing the distribution of statutory corporate tax rate. Again, you would notice, friends, from 2000 to 2020, 2000 was the blue range. From that, you would see invariably the focus has been to a large chunk of countries. From being 30 to 40%, they have moved to 20 to 30. and 10 to 20 is also significantly larger at about 28%. So, which clearly shows that globally, countries are preferring to charge lower and lower taxes on corporates to attract more investments and employment opportunities. Again, the reduced rate of zero rated jurisdictions. If you notice, there are 12 in 2020, 12 jurisdictions had no corporate taxes, and these were typically your UAE. All these offshore jurisdictions, Guernsey, Caymans, Bermuda, Bahamas, BVI, Angola, Jersey, where of these jurisdictions had zero taxes. Two jurisdictions, Barbados and Hungary, had a positive uh, corporate tax rate of less than 10%. I mean, that's where if you go to the statistic, less than 10%, you still have today about 12, 13 jurisdictions. That's really encouraging. Nine jurisdictions, including Germany, decreased their corporate tax rates by 20 percentage points or more. I mean, compared in the last 20 years, that's again a very revealing statistic. Um, Hungary, however, also had local business tax, which does not use corporate tax as its base. So this is not included in Hungary's tax rate. So that's a domestic levy. And there were 10 jurisdictions which we saw which were less than 10% in 2000. Now it's increased to 14%, 14 jurisdictions. And also, Guernsey, Jersey, and Isle of Man eliminated preferential regimes and reduced their standard tax rate to zero. And Barbados brought it down to 5.5%. And from 2019 to 20, the combined statutory tax rate decreased in 7 jurisdictions. So, effectively, if you notice, there has been a very clear empirical evidence to prove that corporate tax rates have been coming down. This chart would give you a fantastic perspective in this. So, the left side is how the rates were in 2000, and the right extreme is 2020. And if you notice, friends, the green ones on top is the African ones. So, from 35%, they have come down to about 27, 28%. The overall is the red one, which has come down from 28% to marginally above 21%. And Asia, where we are in, we talk about, that's the light blue. From 20, it has come down to about 17%. And Latin America from 26% has come down to just under 20, about 18, 19%. And OECD countries has come down, the developed economies has come down from 34, 33% to just a tad below 25%, about 23, 24%. So, but the trend is very clearly visible over the last 20 years. And again, if you see the average corporate tax rates, excluding the zero rated tax rates, it's come down from 30.8 to 23%. And again, this is primarily, you would, again, as we saw, in the last decade or so, there has been a concerted effort to bring down corporate tax rate because the peripheral benefits of promoting industries to be profitable are very high. And in 2020, the average statutory tax rate across all 25 jurisdictions, uh, all 25 Latin American jurisdictions, was 19.4%, and which was 6.2% lower than what it was earlier. So there is a significant number. These are not small numbers what we are looking at. Uh, the statutory tax rates, these are some of the disclaimers, standard disclaimers. They do not give the full picture because some cases that you do have preferential tax rates for certain industries. Ireland is a classic example. Also, some jurisdictions may have progressive rate structures, which India is another example, especially when it comes to surcharge. And in certain cases, the jurisdictions tax distributed earnings in addition to corporate tax. So that's where uh, the dividend distribution tax effect gets offset. Again, effective tax on corporate tax rates and IP regimes. That data is still not fully there, as we would say, but definitely it's far better than what it used to be, and we are not groping in the dark. Now let's move on to the effective tax rate. So far what we were talking was on the headline rate. Now let's look at the effective tax rate. So variations in the definition of corporate tax bases across jurisdictions can again have a significant impact. So, in order to capture several important features such as depreciation rules, allowances, and reduction, it's important to consider effective tax rates, which would provide a more accurate perspective. So, the scope of corporate tax statistics database, it puts forward forward-looking effective tax rates using information about specific tax policy rules. And unlike the backward-looking ETRs, they do not incorporate any information about firms' actual tax payments. It also considers multiple incentives like R&D benefits and deferrals. So, tax policy indicators, the corporate tax statistics database contains four policy forward looking indicators: effective average tax rate, effective marginal tax rate. So, average tax rate, we are aware that's the average tax contribution a firm makes on an investment project earning above zero economic profits. Effective marginal tax rate, it measures the extent to which taxation increases the user cost of capital. So that's the pre-tax return on rate of return required by investors to break even. Cost of capital, of course, is the pre-tax return on capital required to generate zero post-tax economic profits. And NPV of capital allowances as a share of initial investments, if nothing but a discounted cash flow mechanism. Now, all four policy indicators are calculated applying jurisdiction-specific tax rules. So that's a mechanism which OECD has adopted for these four mechanisms. And if we were to look at the trends in this, the average effective tax rate across jurisdictions is about 20.1%, and that's 1.3 percentage lower than the average statutory tax rate. So which gives you the case for reductions and other allowances. Even in India, if you notice, friends, we have this 25% and 22%, which is 25% with the cushion of allowances and 22% without the cushion of allowances. And across the entire sample, the effective tax rate ranged from 45.7% in India, that's like when India had DDT, to 0% in British Virgin Islands. And if fiscal depreciation is compared to true economic depreciation, or if there are other significant base narrowing provisions, the effective average tax rate will be lower than the stat tax rate, primarily because the base gets larger. Disaggregating the results to the asset level shows that fiscal acceleration is strongest for investments in building and tangible assets. Moving on, if we see the trends, the jurisdictions with relatively high corporate income tax rates and relatively generous capital allowances, notably India, for example, France, Germany, they rank lower in the effective average tax rate. And those with decelerating fiscal depreciation, including Czech, Slovak, Thailand, are ranked higher in the effective marginal tax rate. So, which clearly shows that these jurisdictions have a good investment cycle going on. And the fact that because of depreciation, we are having a much lower tax rate is definitely heartening. And for jurisdictions with an ACE, the composite, which is the allowance for corporate equity, the composite effective marginal tax rate will generally be lower because of notional interest deduction, which is available on equity financed projects, which is there in cases like Belgium, Brazil, Cyprus, Italy, Liechtenstein, Malta, Poland, Portugal, and Turkey. And comparing the EMDRs in 2019 with previous year shows that changes in the corporate tax provisions covered in the calculation had substantial effects in three jurisdictions: Poland, Canada, and UK. So, if you notice, friends, what is the insights and impact on asset categories based on the effective tax rate? That's very, very incisive, because these are more for the policymakers to determine the cause effect relationship. If they want to, let's say, increase the gross fixed capital formation and also increase the capex in India. Now, what drives that? So, does a lower tax rate, effective tax rate, increases investments or vice versa? So, investments in tangible assets benefit more often from accelerated depreciation, tax depreciation, than other investments. Investments in buildings are also often accelerated compared to tangible assets. However, the mean is much lower than the median, suggesting that some jurisdictions offer a particularly generous tax treatment for investment in buildings. So, again, a case for our policymakers, especially in times like these. So these could, if we get to know that in economics, what we say is the multiplier effect, where you subsidize sectors which have the highest multiplier effect. For example, you subsidize, let's say, a construction sector, which has one of the highest multiplier effect. It triggers much more economic activity than, let's say, subsidizing a jewelry sector or gold. So something similar to that, if we are to incentivize certain specific sectors, it triggers a chain reaction. This could be an indicator for the government to do. Investments in inventories often benefit from lower effective marginal tax rate compared to rates. Moving on, tax incentives for R&D, an area which really pains me in life, an area where India needs to be investing a lot, but we are not doing, is uh, is in this space. R&D tax incentives, in addition to direct forms of support, such as R&D grants or government purchase of R&D services, are offered by several jurisdictions, and these can uh, be of tremendous incentive for corporates to spend in this space. To give you a perspective, India had what we call a Section 35 for scientific research, where we used to get benefits anywhere between 100, 150, and 200% of the amount spent. But unfortunately, this has been brought down to 100% last year. Uh, at a time when a country like China, which has like uh, 4, 5 times the size of Indian economy, they are spending 4 times the amount of money on R&D, which is about 2.5%. Whereas India spends 0.6% of our GDP on R&D. Country like Israel spends 4.8%, if I'm not wrong. US again another between 2.5 to 3%. So that's where our real focus has to be in terms of developing our intellectual capital, but not putting in R&D as a benefit. I mean, is a serious cause for as a tax incentive. This is a serious cause for concern. I agree the government wanted to simplify and all those things, but R&D is really investing for the future, and we see that tax incentives are one of the most efficient ways of promoting investment in this space. In 2017, the total value of R&D tax relief across OECD, EU, and other major economies reached close to $65 billion, with 45 billion only from the OECD area. And R&D as a percentage of GDP between 2006 and 2007, total governmental support, which is direct and national tax support, uh, increased as a percentage of GDP in 29 out of the 46 jurisdictions, of which Russia, France, and Belgium provided the largest levels of support. And the subnational, which is the state level R&D tax incentives, account for nearly 30% of the total tax support in Canada. And 5 OECD jurisdictions relied solely on direct support, which is Estonia, Finland, Germany, Luxembourg, and Switzerland. 30 out of 36 jurisdictions offers tax relief on R&D expenses in 2019 compared to 19 in 2000. So if you see direct government funding and tax support for businesses in R&D, I don't think I'm able to see India in this list at all. Uh, that's so unfortunate. Okay. Anyway, am I wrong? No, I don't see India in this list. So the difference in cost of R&D tax relief reflect differences in design of features and eligibility rules. The use of carryover and refundability provisions by firm with insufficient tax liability also influences the cost of tax support, particularly after an economic downturn. So this is how the governments have been doing. They're moving from direct support to R&D tax support. So instead of directly subsidizing ventures, they are giving tax incentives, and that's like more than half at this point in time in 2017. India would probably be one of the very few jurisdictions which is pulling back the R&D benefits anyway. Implied marginal tax stability, tax subsidy rates, based on the B indicator, which means the tax component of the cost of capital for an R&D asset. It provides a synthetic indicator of the expected generosity of the tax system towards an extra unit of firm's R&D investment. Over time, the R&D investments, as we see, have become more generous on an average. And persistently higher subsidy rates are offered over time to SMEs vis-a-vis large firms in both profit as well as loss-making entities, where there are refunds which are being offered. So the impact of refund and carryover promotions. So to promote R&D in firms that would otherwise not be able to utilize the support provided by the tax system, there is this refund and carryover mechanism. Like, let's say the firm's profitability is only 2 crores and it has already spent 1.5 crores in R&D, which is eligible for 200% deduction. So which means the firm will have a loss of 1 crore. Now, where will they carry forward this loss? So what will they do with this loss if they're not going to get benefit? So which is where the refund mechanism kicks in. Compared to refunds, carry forward provisions as such as those which is available in Spain imply a lower subsidy for loss-making firms compared to profitable firms. So in jurisdictions where no such provision exists, such as Brazil or Japan, loss-making firms experience a full loss of tax benefits. So that's a disincentive. So see, everywhere you would see the extent of focus which is being put on R&D, and where the government of India, I think, really needs to reconsider its economic policy in this regard. Implied marginal tax subsidy rates. Again, friends, the average implied tax subsidy rates per dollar invested in R&D in OECD jurisdictions was 14% for large firms, 17% for SME profitable firms, and 12% was for large loss-making entities, and 14% for SME loss-making firms. So that's the tax subsidy, which is gone fairly healthy subsidies. Now you would see this is very important for us. R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP. You would see India at the last. The last line is India, which is at 0.65%. We would see UK is at nearly 5%. The gray one is South Korea at 4.8%. You would Yellow is your Japan, which is at 3.2%. Uh, China is at 2.2%. Belgium is at 2.8%. So, I mean, literally every jurisdiction is way, 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 way above India. And what is really concerning is we've also pulled back the incentive for an R&D. I mean, and the slide has come. So R&D expenditure was 0.65%, and the weighted reduction, as we were discussing, has all been reduced to 100% vis-a-vis 150%, which was available. And above incentives are not available for companies which are opting for beneficial tax rates of 15 or 22%. I mean, I really don't understand why. Anonymized and aggregated CBCR statistics. So CBCR is country by country reporting. This was one reporting which OECD pushed, and where they wanted to get a complete group level perspective of all multinationals operating in multiple jurisdictions, where the home jurisdiction or any jurisdiction of substance would get a complete perspective on the operations of the MNE, and also to check tax avoidance or profit shifting. So the 2020 edition of the corporate tax statistics include the first release of aggregated CBCR statistics, which are for the year 2016 and include CBCRs filed in 26 jurisdictions covering nearly 4,000 MNE groups. And you would see how that data is segregated. It provides global information on M&E activities, and the information is reported by jurisdiction of tax residents and not incorporation. So that's very, very important. The cross-country information on M&Es are segregated on the basis of major activities, and they provide governments and researchers with very interesting information to analyze their behavior. So, anonymized and aggregated CBCR statistics. 137 jurisdictions, 58 jurisdictions accepted by CBCR for 2016, 35 have received 20 plus CBCRs. If you see in India, I think the threshold is about 6,500 crores, 750 million euros. That's a threshold for applicability of CBCR. And anonymized and aggregated CBCR statistics provided by the OECD, provided to OECD by 26 jurisdictions, which effectively cover 74% of CBCRs filed. And what is the limitations? It's too aggregated. Of course, it's macro data. These are based on financial accounting, and they may not necessarily represent how items are reported for tax purposes, consequent to difference in accounting standards. Further, there could be differences in accounting standards across jurisdictions. Several jurisdictions, including large ones, have not submitted aggregated CBCR statistics. And the CAT exempt companies such as pension funds or university or hospitals are required to file CBCR, included. They are also included in the aggregated statistics. So if let's look at, I would love to take India. The level of data disaggregation: 162 individual jurisdictions. We've had 165 CBCRs, probably one of the largest, highest, I would say. Number two, in this Italy, 181 was 181 was France, 165 is India, Korea is above at 185, and of course the big daddy US is at 1101. Um, I'll take India. Unrelated party revenues again in millions of dollars. It's about $4.6 billion. Total tangible assets is $6.8 billion. Income tax accrued is 128 million. Number of employees about 30,000. So that's the scope of businesses which got covered under CBCR. And M&E's contribution to total corporate income tax revenues. Again, this will be an interesting, uh, as a percentage, you would see the the local affiliates owned by foreign corporates. That's the yellow ones. And the blue ones are local affiliates owned by domestic multinationals. And Ireland, of course, has by far the largest. We all know why. USA again, domestic contribution is higher than overseas subsidiaries in US. Norway again, domestic is higher. Luxembourg, for obvious reasons, global subsidiaries are higher contributors. Singapore again, global entities have higher. Japan, domestic is higher. Korea, domestic is higher. India, domestic is higher. So this is like Indonesia, sorry. So you would see that jurisdictions of substance have a higher jurisdictions of substance have a far higher domestic contribution vis-a-vis the multinational subsidiaries are located in that jurisdiction. And of course, jurisdictions like Ireland and Luxembourg and Singapore obviously will have a global contribution being, superseding the domestic contribution. Jurisdiction groups shares of foreign M&E activity. So what do they actually do? Uh, High income jurisdiction groups, you would see the taxes accrued are about higher than 35%. So the investment hubs are defined as jurisdiction with total inward foreign direct investment position above 150% GDP. All your uh, what should I say? Your fund management jurisdictions like Singapore, Mauritius, Cayman, BVI, Bermuda would come within this perspective. You would still see that for India, Mauritius and Singapore still contributes more than 50% of the FDI. It's practically not possible, right? So it comes via these hubs. So moving on, top three business activities performed in jurisdiction groups. With high income groups, it's sales, service, and other activities. With lower income, it is services. Predominantly, it's financial services. Middle income, again, it's sales, manufacturing, and services. Stateless, other activities, holding shares or services, which is typically nothing but nominee ownership. That's where all your BEPS rules operate. Investment hubs, again, you look at Singapore, Mauritius, or Guernsey, it's holding shares, sales, and other activities. So improved CBCR data and analysis is expected because a lot more columns are expected to be added going forward, and the data is like to be captured is likely to get expanded. You would see day before yesterday we got a circular from CBDT on what kind of data would be accepted in the revised 26 AS. We are moving into a faceless assessment. We are moving into pre-filled returns primarily because the quality of data input is going to be far better than what it used to be in the past. The same thing is going to get reflected in the CBCR as well. Next, intellectual property regimes. Many jurisdictions have implemented IP regimes which allow income from exploitation of certain IP assets to be taxed at a lower rate than the standard statutory tax rate. So, which is effectively you would see your Ireland, the double Irish sandwich effect, right? What structure, what they call it. So all these jurisdictions which have a preferential tax rate will have great IP laws, so that IP gets registered in that jurisdiction, and it's leased out to other jurisdictions of substance. And IP regimes may be used by governments to support R&D activities in their home jurisdiction. And the Nexus approach of BEPS Action 5, which is the minimum standard now, requires that tax benefits for IP income are made conditional on the extent to which a taxpayer has undertaken R&D activities. So it can't be a case where you do your R&D elsewhere, you get the IP registered elsewhere and get a tax benefit there. So it all has to fulfill the Nexus criterion. What qualifies as an IP regime? Regimes that exclusively provide benefits to income from IP, but some regimes categorized as IP are also dual category regimes. They do both. Singapore is one example, Ireland is another. Dual category regimes also provide benefits to income from other geographically mobile activities. The corporate tax database contains information on 51 IP regimes that were in place in 38 jurisdictions in 2019. And out of this 51, 32 were reviewed by the Forum on Harmful Tax Practices as IP only regimes, and 19 were regarded as dual category regimes. If you look at the name itself, it's harmful, right? So Jordan, as of now, is considered harmful. Under review, we have 10 jurisdictions. And in the process of being eliminated or amended, we have 3. Not harmful 22, and not harmful amended list is 22, and harmful ones are 15. So there is this peer review process which is going on, and this is again similar to your FATF, Finance Action Task Force, which is what happened to Mauritius recently. It got grey listed in the FATF, and SEBI's subsequent RBA said mutual fund, NBFCs cannot bring in capital from FATF grey listed jurisdictions. So now funds are moving to Singapore for this reason. So this is, if the jurisdiction is going to be named harmful, then obviously you will have other consequences which will gradually start to follow. So qualifying assets and reduced tax rate. So in the corporate tax statistics database, qualifying assets of IP regimes are grouped into 3 main categories: patents, software, and category 3. And the BEPS report explicitly excludes income from marketing related intangibles. And see, it's typical, right? You would move your customer lists for a huge hefty price and call it as an IP. That's a marketing intangible. And if something falls within the BEPS Action 5 minimum standard on harmful tax practices, then the asset qualifying for the regime may not fall in the 3 categories. And of the 37 regimes found to be not harmful, 37 cover patents, 27 cover software, and 11 in the other asset categories. So the reduced rates under non-harmful IP regimes. So starting from China, India, tax rate under the IP rate regime, and I still do not see what significant tax benefits India is offering on IP at this point in time, because whatever little bit we had has also been pulled out. Maybe they are considering the, if I'm not wrong, the the benefit given for startups if they are innovative. So overall, you would see Panama is strange on the non-harmful category. San Marino again, Singapore not harmful, Thailand fine, you can accept, Ireland to an extent, and Curacao innovation box. Okay, again where it's literally zero tax if you have an IP strategy there. So that's how this gets panned out, friends, across jurisdictions. So if you're getting into an IP structuring transaction, then we have more reasons to get into this. So control foreign corporation. Now, before we get into this, we need to understand what CFC is. So let's say an Indian resident sits in has a company in Singapore where he holds 90% or 100%, and the company alone has income, but he's the brain behind, and he sits in India and operates. So this is the case for CFC. If India has CFC, India does not have CFC, but we do have POEM guidelines, which will make that company a resident of India and bring his income to tax. So likewise, it's an Indian version of CFC. You have CFC regimes in US, in UK, in multiple developed jurisdictions. It comes in different names, whatever you call it. And the BEPS Action 2015 Action 3 set out recommended approaches to develop CFC rules to ensure taxation of certain categories of MNEs income in the jurisdiction of the parent entity. And this is primarily done to ensure the offshores don't eat away the profits of core jurisdictions. So 122 inclusive framework members surveyed, and 49 have CFC in operation, and 11 have no substantial activity tests in place. Interest limitation rules, again in India, we've got, if I'm not wrong, somewhere about 94 or 95 section, where they've said interest, I think, to a related party can't be more than 30% of EBITDA. It's always a possibility that profit shifting can arise from arrangements using third party debt and intra-group debt. BEPS Action 4 final report established rules that linked an entity's interest reduction to its level of economic activity within the jurisdiction. And what is the interest limitation rule? 94B, right? Which says that interest expenditure to its AE will be restricted to 30% of its EBITDA. Because invariably people tend to bring in, let's say, if you need to put in $2 million, you'll bring in $200,000 as equity and remaining 2.8 as debt. And out of the profits, you take out the funds of the yields pertaining to 2.8 as interest on debt. That's something which jurisdictions wanted to restrict. So the information on the present interest limitation rule is available for 134 inclusive framework member jurisdiction. Of this, 67 have indicated that interest limitation rules were in place, and many jurisdictions reported to have more than one interest limitation rule in place. So this is something which jurisdictions are very clearly working on. So the contra is, we call it as thin capitalization, you call it safe harbor, you call it earnings stripping. Ultimately, the sum and substance is interest to an AE can't be a significant chunk of your taxable profits. So what's the sum and substance where we are now? So the database gives a good picture of the tax base of corporates, and with corporate taxes being a significant chunk globally. But what it also throws, friends, is the multiple dimensions with which the issue of tax avoidance is being addressed, the multiple possibilities which the policymakers can look at to significantly enhance focus based outcomes, and trends at a macro level are very clearly evolving. See, corporate taxes are getting lower, CBCR jurisdictions are significantly increasing. You have thin capitalization being prominent, CFC rules getting everywhere. You have your what do you say, POEM guidelines in whatever form is also becoming popular. So, and we, similar to financial transactions, tax jurisdictions are also now being named and shamed for their harmful tax practices. So, because of which jurisdictions of substance like India are expected to get their due share of taxes. So, these were some of our thoughts on this very, very interesting and relevant conversation. Any thoughts, do share, write to us. We always look to hear from you. And again, let's catch up sometime next week on another topic of relevance. Thank you.